آمين والصلاة والسلام الأتمان المتلازمان على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الغر الميامين. أما بعد، فقال الله عز وجل في كتابه المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الذي من الفجر. صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. One of the major things that we are in controversy, experiencing controversy over are the timings of Fajr and Isha. And that is, the ahadith, they tell us that it is the disappearance of the shafaq of the twilight that allows the entrance of Salat al-Isha, and it is the appearance, first break of light horizontally that causes the entrance of Salat al-Fajr. But that, when the calculations have come, there have been disputes because that applies to certain parts of the world, and certain northern parts of the earth, it doesn't apply, that calculation. And there's good reasons for it, but there's an issue. People are now taking those exceptional areas of the world where the standard calculations do not apply and trying to juxtapose or apply that over the standard areas, and that doesn't work. So if you move over with me over the table, we are dealing with is the calculation. The standard Muslim calculation across the Islamic world is 18 degrees, generally speaking, for the entrance of Salat al-Fajr, and 18 degrees for the entrance of Salat al-Isha. This is standard. This has been consistent all the way from about 300 Hijri calendar, just a few generations after Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this has been consistent throughout, and it has been the scholars of the astronomy, the ulama falakiyin, and the scholars of fiqh, jurisprudential Islamic scholars, both have consistently been on the same page that when we're calculating, if we have to, first of all, how are those calculations conducted? Understand, it is not that they have calculated something and then said this aligns with the Fajr timing that the hadith says. Rather, it is what the hadith says, what the Sharia says, what the timing should be, what the correct time for Fajr is, or the correct time for Isha is. And based on that understanding, they consistently determine that happens usually at a certain area when the sun is at a certain level beneath the surface of the horizon, beneath the surface of the earth, or beneath the horizon at a certain degree that it coincides with what the hadith says. And this has been consistent. So now for an illustration. So let's say this is the globe. This is the earth. All right? And that's the equator right there. Okay? That's the equator. And we are in Chicago, and equator is at 0 degrees. All right. So there's latitudinal degrees and there's longitudinal degrees. Right. That's how the Earth is divided. So on the latitudes, we are about 42 degrees latitude here in Chicago. About 42 degrees. So for us, the horizon is right here. So if I were to draw another area, and let's say this is the horizon in Chicago. And you are standing right here. And you're looking at the sun. And the sun is right here. This is east and this is west. You know that the sun rises from the east and sets in the west. This is the sun rising from here indicates Salat al-Fajr. From here actually rather. And the sun setting over here indicates the orbit of the sun that is descending and going towards Salat al-Maghrib at sunset. The same thing happens here. So when your horizon is at 0 degrees. So as you go, let's start from Isha first, and then we'll talk about Fajr now. So for Isha, for instance, let's start with Isha. You have -6 degrees below the horizon. There's -12 degrees. There's -16 degrees, -18 degrees. 18 degrees below, and then this obviously goes on. When the sun is setting, at this point right here, just below the horizon, it's the sunset, and that indicates the entrance of Salatul Maghrib. Now what happens according to Sharia, that the ufuq has to disappear, the shafaq has to disappear, the twilight, I'm sorry, not the ufuq, but the shafaq has to disappear, and the twilight has to disappear. And the twilight has disappearance according to standard, consistent calculations of the scholars of Islam, both Muslim astronomers and fuqaha, that it has been when the sun reaches at this level right here. So when the sun is at about negative 18 degrees below the horizon from wherever you are, that's when the sky is devoid of any light. There's no shafaq, there's no twilight remaining. It is true night. That is the entrance of true night. And that is, according to Sharia, the entrance of Salatul Isha. There is no dispute on what the Sharia says. The problem is, some argue it is and this is the white twilight. Some argue it is the red twilight. According to the mazahib of Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Ahmad al-Hanbal. Imam Abu Hanifa says it's the disappearance of white twilight. But what's so interesting about this is that the white twilight and red twilight, when it really comes to the disappearance of the shafaq, ultimately, is really one and the same. Based on the research and understanding of the scholars all the way from 300th century Hijri to today's date, they have understood that really that red twilight is not consistent. Red twilight, depending on the atmospheric conditions and the particle pollution, the moisture, it may appear. So when you have light bouncing off of an object, it gives you the rainbow, the colors of the light, different colors of the light. But if you have no particles, if the sky is clear, there's no meteor pollution, there's no moisture pollution, there's no dust, there's no pollution in the cosmos, then light will come right through you and you will not see any color towards the Isha time. You'll see, of course, major color at the time of Maghrib, but immediately after that, the colors will all disappear because there's no pollution. It seldom happens. So what they have observed, and these are all visually observed by the naked eye, because Islam is for all generations. Islam didn't come for the 21st century only, where you can use all these telescopes and high definition cameras or what have you. And so therefore, 18 degrees is the standard understanding of the timing of the Salat al-Isha. So what is the dispute? So the dispute is, in the USA, there's the very famous organization, the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA. And ISNA has its own fiqh department. And they, in their research or deliberations, have concluded that the Isha really enters at 15 or 16 degrees. And they are speaking of the disappearance of the red twilight. For people in where we are at 42 degrees, 18 is easy because the sun actually is descending below the 18 degrees and you are able to see that the shafaq is disappearing. And mind you again, red twilight, shafaq al-ahmar, or the white twilight, shafaq al-abyad, लाल शफक या सफेद शफक, ये दोनों एक ही टाइम पर छुपते हैं. ये दोनों, depending on where the scholars of the time were viewing on the sky that they were watching, depending on the aerial pollution, if you will, they might have seen the red shafaq last longer. But there are other parts of the world where the red twilight does not last longer. It is the white twilight. And other places, white twilight and red twilight, they both disappear at the same time. And so that's the reason consistently the scholars said 18 degrees is the way to go. And same thing for Salat Isha. It is when the sun goes below the horizon, circles around the earth. Obviously we know that it is not the earth that revolves, the sun that revolves around the earth. It is the earth that revolves around the sun, right? But for our ease of understanding, this is the illustration because we are stationary and it looks like the sun is going around us. So let's just use that just for our understanding purposes. So now the sun is going, is elevating, and when the sun reaches about 18 degrees, just before 18 degrees, let's say, I don't know, 18.5 or maybe even 19. This is a very major area of confusion. There's two concepts. Subh al-Sadiq or Subh al-Kadhib. False dawn and true dawn. Subh al-Kadhib, false dawn, is when the very first, after complete darkness of the true night, when the first light emanates. Usually it is referred to, even Sayyidina Muhammad referred to it as the foxtail. And that appears, so if this is the horizon, let's say this is the horizon, the light appears something like this. A coney shape, kind of bad. It is not very clear, it is very bleak, it's very weak light, but that's the first light that emanates. The reason for that is, if this is the sun, if this is the earth, right, and this is the horizon, and the sun is over here, when at below 18 degrees, what happens, the sun's light is going up. As it goes up, on the horizon, from the horizon, when you look at the sky, you see a light coming off like that. And it's almost vertical. What happens when the sun continues to go up and reaches negative 18, at the 18 degree mark below the surface of the earth, below the horizon, that's when the sun reaches this area, from the horizon, the light is now going at this angle. See that? And so therefore, that's why the hadith says, this is the Daw al-Mustatil wa Daw al-Mustatir. Daw al-Mustatil, which is the light, the vertical light, or the sutun. That is an indication of Subh al-Kadhib, the false Fajr. And that is not the time for Fajr. And this is unanimously agreed upon by all the fuqaha, all the aimma, all the madahib. That false dawn is not the entrance of time. The problem is, those following the 15 degrees, they then claim that those following the 18 degrees are actually assuming the false dawn as the true Fajr. So it's a false allegation. That's not the case. False dawn happens before 18 degrees, and it is so weak that most times you're not able to see it. And in some cases, you might be able to see it once a month or once or a couple of times a year. It is so weak, it cannot be seen easily. You have to have the perfect conditions to be able to view this false dawn light. And then what happens after the false dawn? Everything disappears. It becomes dark again. And hence, the reason it's called false dawn. It's a fake light. So it appears, and a complete darkness again appears. After the complete darkness, on the same horizon, when you look at it again, what happens when the sun reaches 18 degrees below the horizon, you start to see a horizontal light. That's called the astronomical twilight. That's called the Subh Sadiq entrance. So it is that first, and that's when the Quran says about A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir rahim. Kulu, for the fasting. Kulu washrabu hatta yatabayyana lakum al-khayt al-abyad min al-khayt al-abyad min al-khayt al-aswad min al-fajr. Eat and drink. Eat, and this is the verse of Quran Kareem. Eat and drink until you see this is the darkness of night. Right? This is the darkness of night. And this is the sunlight. So here you have sunlight, this is the horizon, and the sun's coming up. When the sun comes up at 18 degrees, you start to see the first rays of light, and they are horizontal. They are mustatir. So think the word used by, and again, it is very clear from the ahadith. Mustatil is tawalat, tul. And it is the vertical light that Rasulullah is referring to, the foxtail-like light, the vertical light. And he says that Subh Sadiq is represented by the Daw al-Mustatir, the light that has, think about wings, spreading wings. So it spreads. So the light spreads from the east, and it is inclined towards the west. But it is more of a horizontal structure viewing than the vertical one. So there is no difference of opinion on what the hadith says in the fuqaha. The problem is, again, when is that happening? What we say, the confusion that the 15 degrees people have, is at 15 degrees, they are seeing this light more clear. But that's not what Rasulullah says. He says, Hatta yatabayyana lakum, the first time, the first crack of dawn, when the first ray of light appears, you don't have to have light on the skies. You don't have to see light on the skies to be able to declare Fajr.
Wow.
which is what happens at 15 degrees. The hadith says that it is the crack of light. It is that first ray of light that appears horizontally on the surface of the horizon. That's when the Fajr time enters. And that only happens at 18 degrees. Now this was just an illustration. And quickly I'll also tell you one more thing. Why this 15 degrees issue came. Because this is not anywhere. We have the scholars of astronomy and fuqaha in all of the Muslim countries, starting from Saudi Arabia, birthplace of Islam, if you will. Saudi Arabia, for generations. Egypt, Morocco, Yemen, Algeria, Tunisia, many, India, Pakistan, Karachi has its own university that has their own calculation. Everyone is consistent with 18 degrees. The entire Islamic world is consistent with 18 degrees. Except for USA and now and parts of Canada because of one group. Now, my hunch is, and again, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but I think what's happening is that this person, this whole idea came up because one of their scholars, one of their engineers, migrated from the UK. You see, UK on the face of the earth. If this is the equator, and we are here in Chicago at 42 degrees, as you go over 48.5 and even over, let's say, 55 degrees above the equator, lots of things change. The winter time, the nights are really long, and summertime, the days are really long. The nights are short in the summertime. What happens for us? The sun is easily able to go below the surface of the earth, below 18 degrees. In certain parts of the world, in northern France, in Ireland, in Scotland, what have you. Let's take Scotland for example. And this is the horizon for Scotland. Scotland, when the sun sets at 0 degrees, and here's 6 degrees, let's see, here's 12, and then go down to, let's say, 18 degrees. All right? What happens in certain parts of the world, up north, near the North Pole, when the sun is setting, the sun doesn't really go all the way down below 18 degrees. In fact, the sun actually, as soon as the sun disappears off the horizon on the west, and Maghrib time enters, before the sun even reaches 18 degrees, before it reaches even 16 or 15 degrees, at about 12 degrees, the sun is coming back up again on the eastern horizon. So they don't see this, their sun never goes below 18 degrees. So they never get to use our calculation. And so therefore, the standard calculation for the rest of the world is 18 degrees. But for those folks who are up north, 18 degrees is non-existent. It's impossible. It's muhal. It doesn't happen. And so therefore, for them, they have to use a different degree to be able to then pray Isha.
Wow.
And in some cases, their twilight. So when the Isha enters for us, the twilight remains till the 18 degrees, right? For them, this light, the twilight below the horizon, on the horizon after Isha, it never disappears. They never see true night. They never see complete black sky. So as soon as the sun sets here, and you have the western twilight appearing on the sky, before this even disappears, the sun appears on the eastern horizon, and that twilight switches from west to east, all of a sudden from east to west. But the light never disappears. So technically, Isha never even enters based on the Sharia. And so they have exceptional situations, exceptional calculations.
Wow.
How is that possible? When something that applies to a place like Scotland, for instance, where sun never sets below 18 degrees, and you use the logic and calculation that applies to that country, and you then force that upon the standard world. It doesn't make sense. Because our sun goes below 18. We have the full circle. We have no problems here. It's for those areas where the sun never goes below.
Wow.
I mean, we knew last year, was it Greenland, I believe, where they had only 2 hours of iftar, suhoor, Isha, Tarawih, Maghrib. They had 20 hours of Siyam, 22 hours of Siyam. Are they going to wait for 18 degrees? No, they have other calculations, other methods. Sharia is offering them. Aqrabul layali, aqrabul bilad. Go with the nearest night. So before this 1 month or 2 month phase that they're going through, what was the timing before this happened? So they would use the nighttime schedule for that night and apply that for this exceptional time zone that they're going through. Or they use the aqrabul bilad. They will look at the nearest countries, like they will look at the North African countries like Tunisia or Morocco, and then use their timings for the prayers, and then they'll adjust it that way. So they have exceptional situations, and some of them, they divide their nights into 7 parts, and then use the seventh part for Isha and the first part, and so on. But how about using those 7 parts and applying it to the standard place of the earth, where you have very clear calculations? It's called rust, these viewings. The calculations, these timings, 18 degrees, the calculations are not based in and of itself. They are based on actual viewing of the sky, and then determining that this aligns with 18 degrees consistently. Isn't that what science says? Any theory that has to be tested in the lab has to be repeated for it to be then made as a law, as a fact. That's when it becomes fact. This is how it was done. It was repeatedly done in different countries of the world, Muslim majority countries, and consistently they've reached the 18 degrees as the timeline for the time of Fajr. The 16 degrees really doesn't apply for our cases. Now the problem is, there's only a little difference. It's only 15 to 20 minute difference between these two. Do we have time?
Yeah, we can go for it.
So there's only about 15-20 minute difference between 18 degrees and 15 degrees calculation. But that makes a big difference, because you are now continuing to eat even after the time of suhoor has ended. The 15 degrees people are essentially telling the ummah to continue to eat, and the time of Fajr hasn't entered. So how long can ignorance be bliss? How long can ignorance get you off the hook? We have scientific explanations, we have jurisprudential explanations, we have Islamic scholars saying that anyone who claims 16 degrees is shaz. The term shaz, the scholars will know when they listen to it, that they call them anomalies. They have ridiculed any such calculation, and they've said they are butlan, that they are a farce. The reason that they're saying they're a farce, because for one, you're causing fitna in the ummah. And the funny thing is, when you propagate a certain misinformation so much, unfortunately, the false becomes the truth and the truth becomes the false. Yeah. Because that becomes predominant because of whatever resources that they might have. The fact is, historically speaking and academically speaking, it's always been based on the Quran and Sunnah, which is aligned by 18 degrees for Fajr and 18 degrees. Now, there are some variations. Egypt, for instance, they start Fajr even earlier at 19 degrees. Even more precautious. And for Isha, there's been a range of 17 to 18. But the general range across the Muslim world has been no less than 17 degrees and no more than 19 or 19 and a half. It's always been within this. And for the most part, the median number has always been 18. Scholars. We have scholars going back, and recently I actually, when I was researching for this topic to understand what those who claim for it to be 15 degrees, what are their evidences? For one of the, I was surprised, a very popular, very famous young speaker, a scholar in the US. And he's listed out some names, that all these names, like Al-Bayruni, Al-Battata, and As-Sufi, and other scholars, they've all concluded it to be 15 degrees. And I was shocked, because it's clear false. Correct. Scholars, for example, Al-Battata, who died in 317 Hijri. 317 Hijri. We are in 1444 Hijri. From that time, he was the earliest known scholar, a Muslim scholar and a well-known alim falaki, who concluded it was 18 degrees. And after him, Al-Bayruni, another world-famous name, 18 degrees. As-Sufi, Al-Shirazi, there are countless names. And Fuqaha, Al-Shirazi, and there are many other scholars. The names are skipping off my head right now, my mind right now. But the Fuqaha and the astronomers, they've all consistently concluded. In Yemen, there's one case where in Yemen, parts of Hadramaut, they switched to 15 degrees. The scholars have blasted that move in the Arab world. Because for one, it is wrong. Secondly, they said, even if they did, apparently the country of Yemen did not adapt to that. It was one city in Yemen called Hadramaut. And even in Hadramaut, it is said, only one portion or certain portions of Hadramaut, of that city, is where they adapted the 15 degrees. Rest of the country of Yemen, including the rest of the ports of Hadramaut, are all sticking to 18 degrees. Countries, and in this case, to accommodate all the other schools of thoughts, both in Aqidah and Fiqh, Ibn Taymiyyah, 18 degrees, Usaymin, 18 degrees, the Deobandis, 18 degrees, and for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, all of the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, including the great scholar Imam Ahmad Rida Khan Fazl Bari rahmatullahi alayh, he also vehemently rejected the 15 degrees and proposed the 18 degrees based on calculations. And what is very interesting is that he wrote a book in Arabic, Dar al-Qabh عن درك وقت صلاة الفجر, how the title is. That book has been touted by Arab scholars, both contemporary and the one during his time, as one of those proofs and evidences that are using for the 18-degree calculations, among others. So I've read so many Arabic scholarly articles and books on this, and I remiss any book where I haven't seen Imam Ahmad Rida Khan Sahib's name in there as reference in support of the 18 degrees. It is consistent across the world. This need not be such a big issue, yes, really, and that we have to spend an entire khutbah or bayan on this. This is a very simple issue, but the problem is it is causing so much confusion and unnecessary angst amongst people and causing disruptions of their salat. People are praying Isha before Isha enters, and it is a shame that why would you take ihtiyat and wait the 15 minutes so that you're covered? Now there are some scholars who advise, okay, well, you know what, I will stop the suhoor at the 18 degrees, but I'll pray Fajr at 15 degrees. No problem, do it. That is your approach to ihtiyat. That is welcome, that is no problem. But that is only addressing how to approach it. But what are the facts? The facts based on Quran and Sunnah and the scholarly consensus is that it is 18 degrees when the Subh Sadiq enters, and it is 18 degrees for the most part when the twilight completely disappears from the horizon and Isha enters. Inshallah, if this needs to be discussed, continued, we can after the fact in the dars, inshallah. But I wanted to bring this up in the Salat al-Jum'ah bayan so that it reaches more people, and this brings some clarity. Obviously, it is very complicated. The details are very, it's more involved. But some of the high-level items is what I have shared with you. In conclusion, understand that this is all from Quran and Sunnah. This is not an opinion of a certain person. All these measurements or irsad that have been done by the naked eye, by scholars of Islam, by people who knew. And those who are the 15 degrees that now are popping up here sometimes, they either they are viewing the sky from the city area, where I've said that light contamination is major, and such calculations by both European, US, and Arab scholars have been rejected. That such sightings from the city area watching the sky are unacceptable. They have no place in science. They have no place in academia. If you're going to sit on the top of a building in the middle of a city with street lights and all that. And other claims to 15 degrees have been rejected based on the fact that those people are doing these sightings from one particular area in its entirety. So if they do, let's say, a month-long test with 4 or 5 people, and they do it only in one location, whilst all the rest of the Muslim world has done it across the globe, across the Arab Peninsula, and they've been consistent on this particular item. Again, this is not such a major controversial issue that we should be discussing, spending so much time on this. It is unfortunate that we have to spend time on this when the scholars have said something that is very clearly, but because somebody is going against the grain, that we have to squash these things repeatedly so that this doesn't reappear for generations to come, inshallah.